What's up guys, welcome back. Today we're covering 10 more removed items from Smite's history. This is a part 2 to a video I made a while back covering 10 removed items, so go check that out before or after this one if you want more info on the subject. But let's get straight into it with number 10. I also want to say that I'm a little bit sick I think, so if my voice sounds fucked, that's why. But hopefully you'll still enjoy. At number 10 we've got Heaven's Will. Now back in the day, all basic attack damage was physical, even on magical characters, so this is pretty important to preface for the item because it has both types of power and lifesteal on a single item, so it has physical and magical. I guess you'd buy this to give your auto attacks and your abilities power and lifesteal rather than just buying an item that gives it to one or the other, but apparently it was a pretty bad item just because the stats weren't really worth the cost, because it's just giving you a bit of lifesteal and a bit of power for like a pretty hefty price, so the stats just didn't justify the cost, so no one really built it. Still, it's a cool look at how the game used to work back then with all auto attacks being physical, with stuff like Deathbringer, Ymir and things like that, which was pretty fun. Next up we got Dementor's Doll. Dementor's was kind of the first iteration of the current ethereal staff with a similar passive, which gave a recurring effect of % health magical damage on your abilities every few seconds. However, Dementor's Doll did 8% of their magical health every 3 seconds, whereas E-Staff currently does 5% every 10 seconds, so it was much more powerful on the passive. Dementor's also had some CDR on the item, which synergized better with the passive than like the CCR and health that E-Staff has for some reason. I didn't get to play with this item, but it seems like it'd just be a better E-Staff because the passive's stronger, it's got CDR on it so you can proc the passive more with more abilities. And overall it just seems like it had better stats, to be honest, so it could be cool to play around with, but I imagine it might be quite OP because E-Staff's already a decent item and this is just basically a better version of E-Staff. At number 8, it's not a single item, but it's rituals. I'm sure a lot of you have played with these because they were released in Season 4 fairly recently, but they were aimed to be kind of endgame powerful consumables that would give you the edge in a fight but for a cost, and there were 4 available at launch: Flickering, Frenzied, Rallying and Revealing rituals. Flickering was basically a one-use combat blink for 750 gold, Frenzied was just Frenzy, the current relic that we have. Rallying was teleport to gods. If you ever play with that, it just teleports you a god after a certain time, like regular teleport but to gods. And Revealing ritual was basically just new Arrow but with no damage on it. They tried balancing rituals, but they were pretty much just ruining games with stuff like 4 people buying Rallying ritual and TPing to someone for a backdoor on the enemy Titan, stuff like that. And mages having access to constant combat blinks whenever they wanted was complete AIDS, so they removed them in patch 4.5. Supposedly they're returning at some point, but in a different form, presumably less OP, so that could be cool to see when they eventually add them back. At number 7 we got Tribal Ward. This was a starter item focused on like increasing camp and minion clear, because it did extra bonus damage to minions and jungle camps and reduced the damage you take from jungle camps. It also gave additional run speed out of combat, which combined with the reduced damage from jungle camps makes me think this was probably a jungle item. I'm not entirely sure if this was released before or after Bumba's Mask, because if it was after Bumba's Mask there's no reason to buy it because you just buy Bumbas as a jungler, but it could have been like the predecessor to Bumba's Mask that was the original jungle item. I think that might have been what it'd been, but I'm not sure on that. So if you know when this item was released, before or after Bumba's Mask, make sure you leave a comment. But it seems like it could be a decently powerful jungle item, but I don't see why you build it over Bumba's Mask because of the ridiculous sustain that Bumba's Mask gives you. Next up we've got Bracer of Replenishment. This is like a really cheap item at 1850 gold, focused around getting regen for your entire team, which is similar to like the Sovereignty and Heartward Amulet auras, giving HP 5 and MP 5 that we have today. They basically just increase the entire team's HP 5 and MP 5 if they're within 70 feet of the character that has the item. But other than a bit of mana, it didn't really give anything else, so I imagine it'd been a pretty shit item because it's just got terrible stats even for the cheap cost. Like all it gives you is regen and mana, like that's just not powerful enough. But maybe it could have seen some decent use in Assault, since people build Sovereignty and Heartward in Assault just for the regen auras really. So it could have seen use in Assault maybe for the team-wide regen. At number 5 we got Midas boots, or Midas's boots, however you want to say it. This particular pair of boots was similar to Talaria boots in the way that it generates you extra gold, and it was often picked up on supports back in the day because of that. But it didn't give extra speed like Talaria boots do. That was on a separate pair of boots back in the day called Celerity boots, which increased your movement speed out of combat. But instead of forcing you to hit enemy gods to gain gold at a rate of 30 gold per 90 seconds, like Talaria boots, these boots simply increased your gold per 5 seconds by 5, so you got an extra 1 gold every second. This yielded a lot more gold than Talaria boots on average, since you don't have to hit gods with it, and you're getting 1 per second instead of 30 per 90 seconds. So naturally they were quite strong, and they gave supports the abilities to get their items online really quickly. But considering what we've got now, like Watcher's Gift, Talaria boots, and low nose mask, all giving supports a bunch of extra gold, it probably wouldn't have been, you know, too much better than what we have now in terms of support gold generation. But if these were brought back into the current game with Watcher's Gift and low nose mask, supports would probably just be top farm every single game. So I'm glad they're not in their current form in the game as they would have been back then. But they were removed in the Season 2 patch and replaced when they merged with Celerity boots and Midas boots to create the Talaria boots that we have in the game today. And number 4, we've got the original Gauntlet of Thebes. Now, before you get mad and comment, "Gauntlet of Thebes is still in the game, you tea-guzzling British cunt!" This item was actually removed from the game at one point, so don't comment that. But it was brought back in another version later on that we have now. The very first iteration of the item was one that boosted your health pool by 15% from items, and also gave you 600 health on the item, which in reality was 690 health due to the passive. This item seemed like it'd be incredibly fun to play around with, especially with synergies like Silver Fox Girdle and Ankle of the Golem, which we'll talk about later, existing back then. You could reach pretty insane HP pools with Thebes and Silver Fox, and then tack on the Ankle of the Golem, which converted 1% of your health pool to power, which could be pretty strong. But the item was removed in beta and was brought back in Season 2 in a different kind of form. Speaking of Silver Fox Girdle, if you thought Stone of Gaia gave a lot of health, you haven't seen Silver Fox Girdle. This item just gave nothing but health pretty much. Tiny bit of HP 5, but it was basically just health. It was pretty expensive at 28.65 gold, with not much to warrant the price other than fuck tons of HP. But like I said, it did have good synergies with Gauntlet of Thebes and Ankh of the Golem back in the day, so that could have been fun. And number 2, we've got Talisman of the Relentless. This was a pretty interesting item that was introduced in the Season 4 PTS client, but it never made it to the full release of Season 4. It built off the Talisman tree, so the Bulwark, Pestilence, Heartward Amulet type of tree, and it was supposed to be a kind of counter item to hard CC by the looks of it. Basically, you gained a stack every time a hard CC effect hit you, and at 3 stacks, the next hard CC that hit you would be negated and you become CC immune for 1 second, like Mantle of Discord's passive. Or like Stone of Gaia's old passive with knockups. The item seemed kinda weak given that it's a really delayed effect that can be hard to use. Like, it's quite hard to make sure you have 3 stacks on it when a hard CC is gonna hit you, so like, it's pretty hard to make sure you have 3 stacks when like an Athena or a Humbats is going to initiate on you or something like that. Plus the 90-second internal cooldown made it even weaker, making it so it wouldn't really proc all too often. So I'm not sure it would have been that strong, but anyone who played in the PTS client for Season 4 and played with this item, you can let me know in the comments if it was actually decent or not, but from the looks of it, I don't think it'd have been that good. It's a cool concept though, gaining stacks and then having something happen later on, which could be a cool concept to add to an item later in the future. And finally, we got Achilles' Spear. This item was an active back in Season 2 that built off the sprint tree of actives as an alternative to Greater Sprint or Heavenly Agility. It was only 600 gold compared to 900 gold of most other fully upgraded actives, but it also had a comparatively lower cooldown at 30 seconds. And it granted a brief period of high attack speed, lifesteal and movement speed, so it was often bought like really early, even in starting builds, like you'd take a starter item, 600 gold on Achilles' Spear and 2 potions or something like that. And you could easily like get early kills or clear out the jungle pretty quickly with the lifesteal and attack speed. It was really good on Freya back then. A lot of people started with just Achilles' Spear and Bombas Mask and jungled Freya with that, and it was pretty strong. But it was removed at the start of Season 3 with the actives changing to relics though. Thanks for watching, hope you learned something and enjoyed the video. If you want more of this type of content, then subscribe and turn on notifications. Also leave a comment if you've got ideas for future top 5s or top 10s or any other kind of video. That's about it, peace out nerds.